My beloved brothers and sisters, when God speaks ahead of time, He does not speak to frighten us. He speaks to prepare us. He speaks so that when the moment arrives, our hearts are not shaken, but strengthened. When heaven reveals something before its appointed time, it is because God wants His children to walk into that moment with faith, not fear, with expectation, not confusion. There are seasons when the voice of God becomes louder than the noise around us. Seasons when the Spirit begins to move in unusual ways, stirring hearts, awakening minds, shifting directions. And the impression that heaven has placed in my spirit is this: a divine shift is coming, and for many, after November 17, life will not look the same again. When God reveals something in advance, He prepares your heart before He changes your season. And this truth becomes clear when you begin to notice how God works behind the scenes long before anything becomes visible in your life. Divine revelation is never accidental and never without purpose. God speaks early because He wants your spirit to adjust before your circumstances shift. Many people desire change, but they are not prepared for the weight of the blessing or the responsibility of the new season. That is why God often begins the transformation internally first. He stirs your heart, awakens your awareness, makes you restless in the places where you once felt comfortable, and gives you glimpses of what is coming so you don't cling to what is passing. When God reveals something ahead of time, He is not simply informing you, He is forming you, strengthening you, cleansing you, and stretching you so that your character can carry what your faith has been asking for. God knows the human heart better than anyone. He knows that shocking change without preparation can overwhelm you, confuse you, or even cause you to step back in fear. That is why He begins to whisper before He begins to move. He lets your spirit sense the shift, feel the pull, and recognize that something is about to unfold. The revelation becomes a divine signal that the old chapter has already expired in heaven, even if it still looks active on earth. This early warning is heaven's way of bringing your heart into alignment with God's timing. Because if your heart is not aligned, you may misinterpret the change, resist the transition, or doubt the very thing that God is sending to bless you. When God prepares your heart, He begins to loosen your attachment to what cannot go with you into the next season. He gently releases relationships, opportunities, and patterns that no longer fit your future. What feels like loss is often God clearing space. What feels like delay is God strengthening your foundation. What feels like stagnation is God inviting you to lean into Him with deeper faith. Revelation before manifestation is a spiritual tool. It is God's way of telling you, I am doing something, and I want you to stay sensitive, alert, and expectant. He prepares your heart through small signs, unusual moments of clarity, renewed hunger for prayer, or a sudden desire for change that you can't logically explain. These are not coincidences, they are spiritual shifts. They signal that God is bringing your heart into the right posture, because a heart that is ready will not panic when the transition arrives. Instead of fear, it will recognize the movement of God. Instead of confusion, it will embrace His will. Instead of hesitation, it will step forward with boldness. God speaks beforehand so that when the season changes, you don't feel like a stranger entering an unfamiliar place. You have already been prepared internally, and your spirit has already said yes. He gets your heart ready so that you can receive what He has prepared, walk into what He has ordained, and stand in what He has already decided in heaven long before it appears on earth. A divine shift is already in motion. And after November 17, many will step into a new chapter, but such a shift rarely begins with loud signs or visible breakthroughs. It often starts quietly in the spiritual realm long before your natural eyes can detect any movement. When heaven initiates a shift, the first thing that changes is not your situation, but the atmosphere around your life. You begin to feel a holy disturbance, a sense that the old season no longer fits you, and the things that once satisfied you no longer hold the same weight. This inner stirring is evidence that God has already begun rearranging things on your behalf. The shift is not waiting for the date to arrive. It has already been released, and the days leading up to it are simply preparing you to recognize it. When a divine shift begins, God repositions people, redirects paths, and dismantles anything that would interfere with what He is about to unfold. Some relationships may fade, not because of conflict, but because they have completed their purpose in your story. Some opportunities may close, not because you failed, but because they were too small for where God is taking you. Some desires may die out, not because you lost passion, but because God is birthing something new within you. These movements are signs that heaven is aligning your life with the chapter that awaits you after November 17. A divine shift also brings clarity. Thoughts that were once foggy begin to settle. Confusion begins to lift. Decisions that were difficult suddenly become obvious. God removes the noise that once distracted you so that you can hear His leading with greater sensitivity. You may notice a sudden increase in spiritual hunger, a stronger desire to pray, or moments where you feel drawn into quiet reflection. These are not random emotions, they are signals of a new chapter forming in the unseen. Before God changes your circumstances, He changes your perception, giving you the eyes to see beyond what is familiar. You begin to sense that something greater is calling you forward. This shift also exposes anything that cannot move with you into the next phase of your destiny. Patterns, habits, and mindsets that were tolerated in the old season begin to feel heavy. God places pressure on the areas that must be refined. He invites you to release what no longer serves your growth. What feels like tension is often transformation. What feels like disruption is God removing the unnecessary weight that would slow you down when the new chapter opens. As November 17 approaches, the spiritual atmosphere intensifies because heaven has set an appointed time for certain breakthroughs, revelations, and alignments to manifest. This doesn't mean everything magically changes overnight. It means the doorway to a new season becomes accessible. Those who have been sensing this shift already know deep within that their journey is turning. They can feel the acceleration, the anticipation, the unseen push that tells them God is not only near, but actively guiding their steps into a chapter designed with purpose, growth, and divine fulfillment. Delay was never denial. It was God's setup for what is about to unfold. And this truth becomes clearer when you look back at seasons where you felt stuck, overlooked, or held back. In those moments, it may have seemed like nothing was moving, nothing was shifting, and your prayers were hanging in the air without answers. But delay is one of God's most intentional tools. He uses it not to discourage you, but to develop you. He allows time to shape your faith, stretch your endurance, refine your desires, and strengthen your reliance on Him. What feels like a pause to you is often preparation to Him. Every delay carries divine purpose because God never wastes time. He uses it to construct what cannot be built overnight. There are blessings that require maturity, opportunities that require stability, and responsibilities that require a deeper spiritual foundation. If these things arrive too early, they can crush instead of elevate. That is why God sometimes slows what you want so He can grow who you are. In the delay, He shapes your character. In the delay, He heals the hidden parts of you. In the delay, He breaks patterns that would sabotage the next season. What you interpreted as God holding something back was often God holding you together. He was making sure that when the breakthrough arrived, you would be strong enough to receive it and wise enough to sustain it. Delay also exposes your true motivations. When something takes longer than expected, it reveals whether your pursuit is driven by faith or impatience. It shows whether you trust God's timing or whether you expect Him to align with your own. Many people want God to move quickly, but they are not ready for the responsibility attached to the blessing. Delay is the testing ground where your motives are purified and your priorities recentered. It creates space for God to separate what is temporary from what is eternal, what is emotional from what is spiritual, and what is convenient from what is truly called. Even when nothing appears to be happening externally, God is working intricately behind the scenes. He is orchestrating connections, moving people into place, adjusting circumstances, and opening doors at the perfect moment. You may think nothing is changing, but heaven is active. God is arranging a sequence of events that will make sense only when everything aligns. Often breakthroughs arrive suddenly, but the preparation for them took far longer than the moment they appear. It is in the delay that God builds the foundation on which the blessing will stand. Delay is also a shield. There were places you wanted to go, people you wanted to trust, and plans you wanted to pursue that would have harmed your destiny if God had allowed them too soon. His delay protected you from disappointment, from wrong connections, and from environments that would have drained your spirit. What looked like slow progress was God redirecting you away from danger and toward purpose. When God finally moves, it becomes clear that the delay was perfectly timed. Nothing was late, everything was aligned with His wisdom. The setup was unfolding in silence, and every moment of waiting was positioning you for what He had already prepared in advance. When heaven is already moving in the unseen, angels assigned, paths aligned, and doors prepared, it means that God has initiated a supernatural process long before you become aware of it. The spiritual realm is always ahead of the natural realm, and what you eventually see with your eyes is only a delayed reflection of what God has already completed in the invisible. When God begins to work, He mobilizes heavenly resources in ways you cannot measure, understand, or predict. Angels are dispatched not randomly, but strategically, carrying instructions, protection, and divine order to places your feet have not yet stepped into. They go ahead of you to clear obstacles, silence threats, and create opportunities that match the destiny God has placed within you. Nothing in your life taken by surprise. Heaven is always several steps ahead, arranging what you will walk into at the appointed time. Paths aligned means God is restructuring the journey itself. He shifts directions you were not expecting, reroutes you around unnecessary battles, and positions you exactly where you need to be. There are moments when you may feel like your steps are uncertain, but in truth, God is guiding your feet with precision. The path you walk is not an accident. It has been shaped by divine intention. Sometimes God closes one route not because it was wrong, but because another route was carrying a blessing that needed to reach you. Alignment is not always comfortable because it pulls you away from what is familiar, but it sets you on a trajectory that leads to purpose, growth, and divine timing. When paths align, you find yourself exactly where heaven intended, at the exact moment you were meant to arrive. Doors prepared means that God has designed opportunities specifically for you. These are not ordinary openings. They are crafted with your name, your calling, and your assignment in mind. Before you even desired the blessing, God prepared the door. Before you prayed for the breakthrough, the door was already built. Before you struggled with uncertainty, the door was positioned in your future. Many doors you tried to open prematurely remained shut, not because God was withholding something, but because the timing, the environment, or your heart was not yet ready. But in the unseen realm, the door was waiting. It was being guarded, preserved, and kept in perfect condition until the moment God would lead you to it. When heaven moves, earthly resistance becomes powerless. People may try to block what God has ordained, but they cannot interfere with what is carried by divine assignment. Circumstances may appear to stand still, but the spiritual movement behind them is unstoppable. Even when you feel forgotten, angels are working. Even when you feel delayed, paths are being straightened. Even when you feel stuck, doors are being built. Heaven's activity is not dependent on your awareness. The workings of God do not pause simply because you do not see them. In the unseen realm, a holy orchestration is unfolding, and every piece is falling into place in perfect harmony. All of this reminds you that what is coming has already begun spiritually. The change, the breakthrough, the elevation, the transformation, none of it starts when you witness it. It starts when God decides it. And once heaven has moved, nothing in the natural can stop what has already been released into your destiny. God's appointed time overrides every obstacle, resistance, and limitation. And this truth becomes evident when you understand that divine timing is not influenced by human schedules, earthly delays, or the opinions of people around you. When God sets an appointed moment for something to unfold in your life, no force in the natural or spiritual realm can interfere with it. You may experience seasons where it feels like everything is working against you, where the doors you knock on remain shut, where progress seems slow, and where breakthroughs seem out of reach. But God's timing is not determined by your circumstances. It is determined by His sovereignty. He is never late, never early, and never uncertain. He moves with precision. And when the appointed time arrives, everything that was once stuck begins to shift. Obstacles that once seemed immovable suddenly collapse. Resistance that once felt overwhelming loses its power. Situations that once appeared impossible begin to align themselves with divine order. This is because God's timing carries authority. It carries weight. It carries a force that dismantles the plans of the enemy and silences every voice that rose against your progress. When God declares, "Now is the time," nothing can hold back what has been released. You don't need to push, force, or strive in your own strength. The timing of God becomes the wind behind you, propelling you into what He has prepared. What was once a struggle becomes effortless, because the grace of God meets you at the exact moment of His choosing. There are seasons when God delays not to deny you, but to ensure that everything is established perfectly. He waits until the right people are in place, until the right environment is set, until your character is refined, and until the atmosphere is ready to receive the blessing. If He moved too soon, the blessing might be mishandled. If He moved too late, the purpose might be compromised. So He moves at the perfect moment, and when that moment comes, it overrides every limitation that once confined you. Mountains crumble, barriers fall, and pathways open that you could not create even if you tried. Divine timing carries the supernatural ability to break through walls that human effort could never penetrate. Even the resistance you faced was not powerful enough to alter God's schedule. Every battle you encountered, every delay you endured, every setback you experienced was still under God's control. The enemy may try to interfere, but he cannot disrupt what God has established. God's appointed time is a decree in the spiritual realm, and once it is set, no earthly force can cancel it. What is meant for you cannot be stolen, delayed indefinitely, or redirected to someone else. It is sealed by God's word, protected by His authority, and delivered by His timing. When the appointed moment comes, you will find yourself stepping into rooms you never imagined, receiving blessings you once doubted, and walking through doors that were previously inaccessible. Everything begins to make sense. The waiting, the battles, the tears, the confusion, all of it was leading toward a moment when God would reveal what He had been preparing behind the scenes. His timing breaks limitations, defeats resistance, and ushers you into a season that carries His unmistakable favor and purpose. When the coming change requires readiness and only surrendered hearts can receive it, it means that God is not simply bringing a shift. He is inviting transformation within you before the transformation around you arrives. Divine change is never random and never forced upon an unprepared spirit. God looks for hearts that are willing, soft, responsive, and flexible enough to move when He moves. A surrendered heart is not perfect. It is available. It is not flawless. It is yielded. It is a heart that says, God, whatever you want to do it in me first. Such readiness does not come through comfort, but through encounters that break pride, refine motives, and deepen trust. When God prepares you for a new season, He begins by dealing with the parts of your heart that might resist His direction. Readiness is a spiritual posture. It means you are awake, alert, and sensitive to the leading of the Holy Spirit. It means you are no longer holding on to the things God is trying to get you to release. Many people pray for change while clinging tightly to what God is trying to remove. They want the new but refuse to let go of the old. They desire the blessing but resist the process. But divine change requires surrender. Surrender of timing, surrender of control, surrender of expectations, surrender of outcomes. A heart that is surrendered is one that trusts God, even when nothing makes sense. It is one that is willing to leave familiar ground when God says move and willing to remain still when God says wait. Before God ushers you into the next season, He prepares you by stripping away anything that would hinder your progress. He convicts you of attitudes that cannot accompany you into a higher calling. He exposes hidden motives that would corrupt the blessing. He draws you away from distractions that weaken your focus. This refining does not feel comfortable, because surrender is often painful to the flesh. But God is not trying to hurt you. He is shaping you. He is making sure that when the change arrives, you can handle it with maturity, humility, and wisdom. Divine preparation is a sign of divine intention. When God prepares a heart, it means He is planning to use it. There is a reason God does not trust significant assignments to half-surrendered people. A heart that is not fully yielded will question God's direction, misinterpret His timing, and hesitate in moments when obedience is required. But a surrendered heart moves with God, not ahead of Him, not behind Him. It flows with His timing and responds to His whispers. Readiness is not about having everything figured out. It is about being aligned with the one who does. When a divine shift is coming, God begins to soften your heart toward His will. You start sensing discomfort in old patterns. You feel drawn to prayer in a deeper way. You feel prompted to forgive, to let go, to reconcile, to renew your commitment. These are signs that God is preparing you. He wants you to walk into the new season without bitterness, without fear, without confusion, and without unnecessary weight. He wants your heart clear and your spirit aligned. Only surrendered hearts can receive divine change, because only surrendered hearts have room for what God is sending. When the change comes, it will not overwhelm you. It will fit you, because God has already shaped you for it. When a shift brings provision, healing, restoration, and calling for many, it means God is not only changing circumstances, He is touching every layer of a person's life in ways they may not have imagined. Divine provision is not merely material. It is God supplying everything needed for the journey ahead. When God brings provision, He fills the empty places, strengthens the weak areas, and answers needs that were hidden even from your own understanding. Sometimes provision appears as resources, sometimes as people, sometimes as opportunities, and sometimes as renewed strength. Provision from God is holistic. It touches the physical, the emotional, the spiritual, and the relational. It comes at the moment when your own strength has reached its end, so you can recognize that what arrives is not coincidence, but the faithfulness of God. Healing is another part of this divine shift. Healing does not always begin in the body. It often begins in the heart. There are wounds from the past, disappointments that buried themselves deep within, betrayals that left scars, and losses that quietly shape the way you see yourself and God. When a divine shift comes, God begins touching these broken places. He brings clarity where confusion dwelled. He brings comfort where pain settled. He restores hope where despair took root. Emotional healing prepares you to enter a new chapter unburdened, unchained, and fully present. Spiritual healing rekindles your faith, renewing your ability to hear God clearly. And physical healing becomes a testimony that accompanies you into the new season. God's healing arrives with purpose, making you whole enough to carry what is coming. Restoration is one of God's most powerful works during a divine shift. Restoration does not merely return what was lost, it returns what was lost in a multiplied, strengthened, and purified form. In seasons of testing, you may lose relationships, confidence, direction, or resources, but God restores in ways that exceed the original. He restores peace that was stolen. He restores dreams you stopped believing in. He restores relationships that were broken under pressure. He restores identity where insecurity tried to erase it. Every area that was touched by pain becomes an area touched by glory. Restoration is God's declaration that the past did not win and the enemy did not have the final word. Calling becomes clearer during this shift. Many people go through life sensing purpose, but never fully grasping it. A divine shift removes the fog from your assignment. You begin to see why certain doors closed, why certain seasons were necessary, why certain battles sharpened you. Calling becomes unmistakable when God prepares you for a new chapter. You feel drawn to roles, responsibilities, and places that align with heaven's design for your life. Your gifts begin to activate. Your passion awakens. Your spirit feels pulled towards something greater than what you have known. God does not bring calling without equipping, nor equipping without opportunity. When calling is revealed, it aligns your identity and directs your steps toward destiny. Provision, healing, restoration, and calling are not random blessings. They are signs that God is preparing people to rise, rebuild, and walk in the fullness of what He intended all along. When God says everything will change, it means the transformation has already begun long before you recognize it. God never announces something that has not already been set in motion in the spiritual realm. His words are not predictions, they are declarations of what He has already ordained. When He speaks of change, it is a signal that the old season has expired in heaven and the new season is already unfolding, even if the natural world has not caught up yet. Transformation begins where eyes cannot see, inside your spirit, inside your atmosphere, inside the alignment of your destiny. You begin to feel restlessness in places that once felt normal. You begin to sense a pulling away from what no longer serves your growth. You notice subtle shifts in conversations, opportunities, and desires. These are not coincidences. They are indicators that God has initiated a divine transition. Everything changes when God decides to shift the trajectory of your life. Relationships shift because some people were only meant to walk with you for a specific chapter. Opportunities shift because the ones ahead of you carry a different weight and purpose. Priorities shift because what once demanded your energy no longer carries the same importance. Even your inner battles shift because God begins to replace fear with courage, confusion with clarity, and hesitation with confidence. Transformation is not only external, it is deeply internal. God begins by adjusting your heart so that when the outward change arrives, you are spiritually prepared to embrace it. When God declares change, He also dismantles anything that would try to resist it. Patterns that once held you back begin to break. Cycles that repeated for years suddenly lose their grip. Mindsets that limited you begin to dissolve. You may not understand why certain things fall apart, but often the breakdown is part of the breakthrough. God removes what cannot go with you into the next season, even if you would have held onto it out of habit or comfort. His love is too great to let you carry unnecessary weight into a chapter that requires freedom and focus. Every ending you experience in a divine shift is tied to a new beginning that is already waiting for you. When God says everything will change, He is also preparing you to receive things you once thought were impossible. Doors that were closed start opening. Resources you lacked begin appearing. Favor you didn't expect starts locating you. The changes God brings are purposeful, strategic, and perfectly timed. He aligns circumstances that once seemed scattered. He brings people into your life who sharpen your spirit and help carry the next assignment. He positions you in environments that reflect your future rather than your past. Change from God is never random. It is orchestrated with precision. As this transformation unfolds, your spirit becomes aware before your mind fully understands. You feel a sense of anticipation that you cannot explain. Moments of clarity come unexpectedly. Peace settles in places where anxiety once lived. These are signs that God has already moved ahead of you and prepared the path. The change is not something you chase, it is something you step into. Everything shifts because God has already spoken it into existence. His word goes ahead of you, prepares the atmosphere, and establishes the outcome. And once God speaks change, nothing in your life can remain the same because His word carries the power to transform every part of your journey.